Hey everyone, it's great to see you. Welcome back. Before we get started, I'd like to say that if you like this video, please like this video. And if you'd like to stick around and talk about games in the future with me, please subscribe, join this little community. Today, I wanted to talk about Dead Space. Remake, developed by Motive Studios. This is a 2023 survival horror game, which is a remake of a 2008 game aptly named Dead Space as well. Motive is kind of an interesting studio. They've only developed a couple games. I thought what was most intriguing is that they were set up to be a studio in EA focused around doing action-adventure games and developing new IPs. But today, I don't think they've developed a new IP. I'm pretty sure that their entire lineup has consisted of existing IP. So they've worked on the Star Wars Battlefront 2 game that came out over the last handful of years, and Star Wars Squadrons, which is a really cool flight sim in the Star Wars universe, and then now Dead Space. And they've had a canceled project as well that we don't know a whole lot about, called Gaia. But as you can see, not a whole lot of original IP going on there, but they did work on this. And I was pretty interested to check it out because I was a huge fan of the Resident Evil remake games that recently have been coming out over the last handful of years as well. And when I heard, hey, we're going to remake Dead Space, I was pretty excited about that. You know, there's not going to be as big of a jump between the original Resident Evil 2 on PlayStation and the Resident Evil 2 remake that we got for PlayStation 4. You won't see that jump for Dead Space, but I was kind of curious to see what all they were going to do. And they did develop a few things that were interesting for it. You know, the game was entirely rebuilt using Frostbite engine, and so through that they were able to kind of dig through the systems, everything from graphically to the physics, and understand how the game works and build it up to make it, you know, shiny and new, I guess. And so they did just that in a few different ways. I mean, one of the things they did was they really improved the violence and gore systems and stuff. You know, the core mechanic of these games is dismembering enemies and getting their limbs off, and that's how you really do a lot of damage to them. And so they've revamped how exactly that looks when you're fighting enemies. They also really improved some of the smaller zero-gravity environment pieces that will happen throughout the game, and I think added a couple as well. And so through Frostbite engine and also taking advantage of solid-state drives of the era, Motive was able to also create a seamless loading experience. You know, in the first game, you'd go on this linear tram system that would take you from level to level, chapter to chapter. But now there's a little more freedom introduced into the game world and design, so really interested to talk a little bit about that. And you know, the only big shame here is that this game was published by our great friends Electronic Arts, who are known for shutting down many studios, including EA Redwood Shores, who originally, with Glenn Schofield, did Dead Space, and also did a handful of very weird, a big variety of titles. You know, Tiger Woods games, James Bond games, The Sims 2 DLCs, The Godfather. I mean, that's a very, and then you got Dead Space. It's a very weird kind of lineup of games for the studios. But rest in peace to them. It is interesting that EA decided to revisit this, and I've heard in recent times that this whole series remake thing might already be over. I don't think EA has a whole lot of interest in going forward with Dead Space 2. At least they've said, hey, that's a lie. We didn't say that. But that's what leakers are saying. So I guess we'll figure out more as time goes on. Anyways, as with games of this generation, we just have your typical box here. And we pop it open, and you have just a disc. Nothing more. I still find it funny that if they never have plans to actually have these little tabs included, then why are they going to go ahead and keep the tabs in here? I'm just not very much sure about that. But nonetheless, I'll set this here. And I want to talk a little bit about the story. So the story is pretty unchanged from the original Dead Space. You play as Starship Engineer Isaac Clarke, and he is on a journey with a few other folks on a repair vessel to go to the USG Ishimura. And the Ishimura is a planet cracker vessel. And so essentially what this does is, at this point in the human timeline, I guess, it's commonplace for resources to be extracted from planets essentially by blowing giant holes in them and getting all the minerals out. The USG Ishimura goes basically dark mode. Like, nobody hears from it, nobody knows what's going on, and so the repair vessel is sent in, and Isaac has a intrinsic purpose in going because his girlfriend is potentially was working on the vessel, and so he's on not only a mission to help the repair situation, but also to find his girlfriend, which is admirable for him, I guess. And right about the time you get into the welcome lobby, there's an attack of these mutated creatures, and slowly throughout the game, what you'll come to learn is that there is this this beacon, and it basically corrupts, and there's this crazy cult around the beacon, and there's a lot of Shyamalami twist stuff going on as well, that will unfold throughout the story. And I do like that with this being a remake, they didn't decide to change too much about the story. There are some changes to its presentation, however, because in the original game, Isaac Clarke is a silent protagonist, which was very popular of its time, the later 2000s. Isaac is now fully voiced. And he is fully voiced by Gunnar Wright, who originally played the voice actor for Isaac in both Dead Space 2 and 3. So it is really cool that they brought him back, because it feels like, this is Isaac Clarke, and so with the purpose of the remake, they kind of keep some of those values, and I really appreciate that. And I think something that is funny is that for some reason they aged Isaac like 35 years. He went from being like this young 20s looking guy to now being essentially like a 50-year-old man, in at least the way his character models and stuff look, in my opinion. And I think that does kind of change the dynamic between Nicole and Isaac, because they're no longer like a young journeyman engineer, like fresher in his career, studied and has this girlfriend of his who's off on an adventure, or working on the Ishimura, which is at the time, a stellar and big opportunity for anyone who gets to go on that ship, and instead reverts to like these older middle-aged folks. And I think from a story lens, I've aged since 2008, that's for sure, but I don't feel like that dynamic really worked as well for me from a story perspective, and from really engaging with the love interest or engaging with the need to find Nicole. So I think that in some ways, for me personally, though that's such a minor change, it did kind of impact my enjoyment of the story overall. Though I did really enjoy just the core aspects and core elements of the Dead Space story that have always existed since 2008. So it was really fun to just kind of go back through these beats and to re-experience those. You lose some of it because we have the twists, as I was describing, and of course those twists aren't going to be particularly fresh for somebody who's played the game, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. And so from a story lens, if you've played the game before, way back in time or whatever, and you want to re-experience it, I think this is a really great way to do so. And if you've never played the game either, well, then now's your time. And I think that at the price you can get Dead Space Remake nowadays, it's definitely worth picking up if you want to enjoy a fun and interesting survival horror story. I think it does it pretty well. From a gameplay aspect, not much has changed from the original's vision. It's a third-person, over-the-shoulder shooter, which was really popularized because of Resident Evil 4. And this game came out a handful of years following those influences really picking up and taking off, excuse me. And I really do like third-person shooters. I think third-person games in general are probably most up my alley. And so this is fun because survival horror is also a genre that I prefer quite a bit. And I like survival horror games that give you tools of violence. And this game is all about the violence. There's an incredible makeshift variety of tools, all based on kind of Isaac's background. He's like engineering tools like laser splicers and chainsaws and things like that. Things you might imagine an engineer to use when repairing a starship or working on the internals of a starship. And so I've really always liked the aspect of the game that felt kind of homebrewed. It really felt like you're in an environment where Isaac was just trying to piece things together to best survive his situation. And I've always really enjoyed the combat of, cutting the limbs off of enemies to increase the damage output that you're doing to them. Also, I love the way in which they interact with Isaac as well. Sometimes they'll play dead, or you'll shoot their legs off and they'll continue to crawl towards you. And I always found that to be quite fun and engaging from the lens of not getting too bored with the experience. Because one thing that did kind of happen to me is that I played a lot of Dead Space, okay? Dead Space 2 especially was the game that inspired me to really get into trophy hunting, because there was this really difficult trophy in the game where you had to play it on hard. You could only save 3 times. And I thought that sounded like such a challenge that I put myself up to it, and I went and got the platinum for that game. And then I subsequently went and got the platinums for the others. And then I got the platinum in this one too. And so I've played a lot of Dead Space. And when it comes to trying to scare me as a player, the game's not so good at doing that anymore, but that's fine. That's totally fine. The hard part is that I feel very automated in my response to enemies in the environment. I know exactly what weapon to use for the little baby creatures, or the bloater guy who, if you shoot him in the gut, out will spray like all these little sticky demon things, or just your standard necromorph. And I know how to pinpoint right at their legs or right at their arms and take them out as I need. So the gameplay, from the actual pulling the trigger aspects, it was still a lot of fun, but by the end I was thinking, okay, yeah, I've really honed and mastered this gameplay style. I would have liked to see it kick it up a notch. And by kicking it up a notch, I don't know what they would have done, but I'm thinking that as a remake, they took some liberties, I think, to, revisit the environments and build them out and so on. And I would have been fine with them doing a little bit of that here as well. Or, I don't know, create a challenge mode or something that I could really play around with the weapons and so on and so forth. And they do give you those opportunities. One of the big parts of the game is you're exploring this dark, shut down USG Ishimura spaceship, and you find resources, ammo, health kits, whatever, but power nodes are super important, because these are utilized in upgrading your suit and upgrading your weapons and so on and so forth. And one of the big changes to this gameplay design was that in the first game, these, as soon as you used them, if I remember right, they were all locked into whatever upgrade you had chosen. And so you really had to be particularly thoughtful with how you played the game when you found new weapons, if you upgraded the weapon you have, or if you hold those nodes for later so that you could upgrade a more powerful or interesting weapon that you're hoping to find along the way. Now here in Dead Space Remake, they've added a lot of flexibility to the game, which is really nice in terms of you can explore around, you can go look at things if you missed them before, or revisit areas in kind of a Metroidvania, where you need to have gotten certain abilities, like a security card, which I'm not a big fan of that. But they do the same thing with the flexibility for the power nodes, which is you can just remove all the power nodes at no cost whenever you want, and kind of reconfigure them to your weapons, which is really nice, because some of the guns you'll get late game, you won't get to enjoy in the original until you really reach New Game Plus and you start building out their upgrade paths and making them stronger and etc. While in Remake, you can just reconfigure stuff, and so that's nice. But also kind of in the same vein of, I feel like a professional at this game. I've experienced the story. I know the scares. Now you're going to make it kind of a sandbox for me. An opportunity for me to just kind of do whatever I want with these weapons. and further removes the thoughtfulness required of me to play the game as somebody who's experienced it quite a bit. And so, that's not unfortunate, but it is a gameplay aspect I wanted to call out, because from the lens of, if you want something to be challenging for you, I played this on the hardest difficulty that was available on a first run, and I didn't find it to be particularly challenging at all. In fact, I would say my death count was sub 5, maybe. And so, that's kind of a toss-up. For players new to this game, of course, a lot of these minor comments you might not necessarily experience. And so, putting on that hat and thinking about it as somebody who's playing the game for the first time, I would highly recommend this. I mean, in every way possible. I think the flexibility is going to really work for you in terms of being able to try out all the various guns and weapons available to Isaac. You'll have the opportunity to explore these environments for the first time, really get scared a few times. And it would just be an overall blast. And so thinking about it from that lens, again, with the story and a great gameplay experience, I think you'll have fun if you pick this game up. In the world design and navigation, I do quite like some of the aspects of this, because the world is fully kind of open. You can re-explore areas as needed. I think that, well, let me say, the UI is really great, because it comes up like a hologram. You don't leave the environment. You really feel like you're still in the game and you're Isaac exploring his hologram menus or whatever. And one of these is a map. And because of the world's openness now and ability to re-explore, you can essentially explore the whole map and the whole of USG Ishimura as you would like to. But I did find that to be quite cumbersome. Like, sometimes if I got a new security clearance card, which I don't like these again because they're locking up places for really not a particular reason. But I would want to go back on the map and look around and say, okay, well, where were the locked doors that I might be able to use this key card at now? And while I did identify them, eventually it did take quite a bit of time. But I do really like, again, the third-person experience of actually exploring the ship. I think the ship is meticulously detailed and beautifully they've remade the game, yes, but they've added so much detail in the environments that enhance the storytelling and enhance the experience of really feeling like you're on this decrepit horror ship. And so I really did enjoy kind of those experiences. I've always been finicky about animations in third-person games, and Isaac is a really clunky guy. He's wearing this big metal engineering suit, and so he kind of walks like kind of blocky almost. But one of the things that I really did like that they opened up a bit is the game does have a free camera. And by that I mean you could stand there in one spot and you could rotate the full camera around Isaac and he won't turn as the camera turns as well, which is something I've always really liked in a third-person game. Compare that to God of War Ragnarok, where no matter what direction you're facing, you are always seeing the back of Kratos as you move around. So I think that because of that dynamic aspect of the camera and navigation, I really felt built into the world. It really felt like I was immersed in the experience. And so that was a lot of fun, and I think gave way to great storytelling, again, through the world design, through the environments, and through the way in which you wanted to view what was happening at any particular moment. The game sounds great. One of the stories I always love that Glenn Schofield has told before is EA Redwood Shores was based in the Bay Area, and he would ride BART, which is the train system in the Bay Area, and I'm familiar with riding BART. And there's this area where you go through the West Oakland a tunnel to Embarcadero Center from Oakland to downtown San Francisco. And the older trains that used to run on here would have this terrifying, just screeching, high-pitched sound of metal rubbing from the wheels, or the wheels, I guess, of a train against the rail, just kind of smacking back and forth. And you know, Glenn also had that, and he used a lot of that sound as inspiration, along with the team, to create some of the sounds and the sound design in this world. And it's used here again, but also there's a great 3D environment sound about Dead Space. So as you're walking around, you'll hear necromorphs, and you can kind of pinpoint their location based on where you hear the sound coming from. The game can be very quiet at times, and it can be very loud, depending on, you know, where you're at in the ship or what you're doing at that moment. And so I feel like there was an excellent use of dynamics in the sound design. I feel like the sound really enhances the survival horror feeling of the game, and just overall, really is a lot of fun. I don't really remember much of the score of the game, if there is a score. I feel like it was used to a limited degree, but overall I would say I did enjoy kind of the sound design. And when you're in a dark and scary environment, such as the USG Ishimura, maybe not a whole lot of music is warranted for you to really have an immersive experience, and so I did respect that. I've touched on it a little bit. The details are fantastic in this game. Graphically, the game really looks fantastic, you know, and it does look like quite the enhancement from the original. I think the hard part is that the way in which the game now looks is what I remember the game looking like when I played it, you know, 15 years ago. And so when I think about that, I really need to go on YouTube and look up comparison videos in order to understand just how different the game looks. And all the little things about it, the little details, again, around the environments, the way in which Isaac looks, and the animations and the faces. I mean, things just look particularly lifelike. And that makes the necromorphs just even that scarier to look at in the moment. And I did really appreciate that. And I think that just on the remake aspects visually alone, this game quite excels. So yeah, so those are kind of my big thoughts about the game. I guess something I will share is overall conclusions, but I want to do it from two lenses. A new player to the games, and somebody who's played through Dead Space many times, such as myself. I got this game for around $20, $25, somewhere in there. For somebody returning to the game, I think this is still a great price if you do want to re-experience Dead Space in a new light, with a new fresh coat of paint. I think there are a lot of aspects to what Motive has done that do work. And from a remake lens, it is also hard for me to feel like it's a remake because my nostalgia just tells me it was that much better looking, that much smoother, and really played in line with this remake. But, you know, going back and looking at some of that footage from the old game really says otherwise. And so your mileage will vary, I think, in those aspects. And for someone who's never played a Dead Space game, I think this is a fantastic entry point to the series. Dead Space 1 is really heralded as a survival horror of its generation that really defined the genre of the time. And I think that's true. And it's still fun to see that the game can hold up in such a way, be enjoyable, be playable, and make me want to come back and check it out. I do hope that EA does decide to greenlight, if they haven't already, Dead Space 2, because I really like Dead Space 2 quite a lot and would love to go back and experience that game again. So I guess we'll see what's the next steps for that. But until then, I do think this is worth picking up and trying out. All right, anyways, those are my big thoughts. I appreciate you tuning in. And again, if you liked the video, please like the video, and would love for you to subscribe and stick around so that we can chat more about games in the future. Well, until next time, stay well and take care. See you then.